Hey y'all, welcome. This week's episode, 40 Watt Podcast. I'm Philip. It's going to be a great episode. I promise. I can't wait for y'all to hear this conversation I had with Corey Congilio talking about his new music, finding his own voice after being a sideman in Nashville for so long, and just some really, really awesome things around gear and finding identity and the way we see the industry. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation, and it even continues over on Patreon. So if you're really into this conversation, consider joining the Patreon. $5 a month gets you bonus episodes every time podcast episodes go out. Or you can actually individually buy those episodes for $5. Or if you just want to be up on what's going on, I do post over there occasionally. You can join the Patreon as a free member. You won't get the bonus episodes, but you will get updates as some things roll out. Things like our podcast sponsorship, our NAMM House sponsorship that we got from Sweetwater. So we went to NAMM, we did the whole thing. We did the whole NAMM thing. Had a bunch of folks on from 60 Cycle Hum, Play Jason, Working Class Music, Landon Bailey, Henning Pauly, Guitar Dads Podcast, Pedal Playhouse, Cover Band Confidential. I know that I'm missing somebody here and I can't figure out who it is on the fly. So we had a great time. Sweetwater took care of that. And I'm really excited to announce that I'm now a Sweetwater affiliate. So there's a link below where you can click the link, go shop at Sweetwater. You were going to do it anyway if you're in the US, let's be honest. And every time you use that link, they kick me back just a little bit, tiny little amount for sending you over there. It costs you nothing extra and it really helps the podcast keep going. Additional sponsors, y'all, I really need to talk about Barry from Grez Guitars. Barry is making some of my favorite instruments. Go check out Grez Guitars on Instagram. Go check out grezguitars.com. Go check. They're just so good. I've got a Grand Tour, Barry's new model. I sort of helped design that. Really, Barry just did all the designing and I just badgered him until he did it. And I'm so excited to have that guitar. I've wanted that guitar for a long, long time. And it gets played an awful lot here. I think you're really going to like the stuff he's making. It's worth every penny. I know they're not the most budget friendly. They're high-end guitars and they play like it and they sound like it. I think you're going to really love what Barry's making. Additionally, we have Mark from Summer School Electronics sponsoring the podcast. This is his class reunion. This is such a fun pedal. I used it recently to make some fun stuff with the Lizzie Hale Explorer Bird because I don't have a high gain amp, but I turned this on, cranked it up pretty good, and I got a pretty passable high gain sound out of it. I think it sounds grungy and dirty and wonderful. Mark's got a whole bunch of other stuff. He's got a new pedal coming out here very, very soon that I'm not sure is officially announced enough that I can talk about. So be looking on social medias for that. All the links are down below. Lastly, as far as sponsors go, Maris pedals. This is the new Maris Enzo X. I'm currently working on a track with this pedal that I hope to have out in a demo maybe later this week or early next week. It's very outside my wheelhouse. It's a very different thing for me. I had the previous iteration of the Enzo. I liked it and had some fun with it, but ultimately controls were a little finicky and I had trouble with presets and those kinds of things. The Enzo X fixes all of that. I think it's a rad pedal. I think it really opens up some creativity for me to get me thinking in a way I don't normally when I think about guitar. I think you're going to enjoy it. But of course, they make all sorts of other great pedals. The Mercury X is my favorite reverb pedal of all time. So go check out Maris. Their links are down below as well. And I think that's it, y'all. I think I'm going to let y'all get to the podcast. So hope you enjoy this conversation with Corey Congilio. 40 Watters, welcome to this week's episode, 40 Watt Podcast. I'm extremely excited about this episode. You've already heard my preamble, so I probably already waxed poetic at the top here about how much fun this conversation was. In the preamble, I know, because I've already had it. Welcome to the past. That's how this works. We're time travelers. This week, I've got Nashville's very own, by way of a couple of different places, Corey Congilio back on the show. How are you, Corey?
Oh, man, I'm good. It's good to see you, buddy.
Yeah,
I feel like I've only seen you a few weeks ago at NAMM.
I know. It was only a few weeks ago. You were shredding it up with all sorts of folks. I got as much video as I could. Had Matt Schofield. So, listeners, if you go look, I'm pretty sure I posted it on Instagram. There was a reel of Corey and Matt just tearing it up. And there was this great moment where just the drummer and the bassist were like, we're going to take naps. You guys battle it out. And it was just so funky and so cool. And there's this energy when two guitar players do that, and like there's still time, but it becomes fluid, and everybody can just kind of like, I don't know. I love that stuff.
That was totally unrehearsed too. Like we were literally driving the car to the gig to the right location because
Yeah,
we went
I
to
heard
the
about
wrong
that.
location first. There was two bootlegger saloons in California, in Orange County. Who knew? We went to the Costa Mesa one, which I was like, oh, I know this place. It was right in this area. I knew. And then when we showed up and there was like one QSC speaker on a stick, we were like, I don't think this is the right place.
Man.
So that was fun. But he was just like, we're gonna play Black Cat Bone by Albert Collins, and it's kind of like shaky ground. And he was like, at the end, we're just gonna trade off me and you and play some funky stuff. And I had no idea the bass and drums were gonna drop out, but I was like, cool. Like this is like it was almost like, and I'm not saying we're Charlie Parker or anybody, but like it had those like kind of like Coltrane moments where like the whole band drops out and then you're just kind of playing. And I
Yeah.
didn't know if the band was going to come back in, but that's what would have happened back in their day. But anyway, it kind of felt like, hey, this is a fun jazz moment. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
It's organized noodling
Yes,
in a
it
way.
really was. It really was. And honestly, I didn't mind it. I thought it was pretty good.
No, I think it was perfect. So I have that conversation with guitarists all the time. In fact, I had a conversation earlier today with the Studio Rats, Dave and James. I'm Dave, Paul and James. Sorry, Paul. James's last. It's anyway. Neither here nor there. So about moving to modelers, like they were having a conversation because both of those guys are like they're way deep in like the Axe effects and quad cortex, and they love amps too. But I'm like, I have way too much ADHD. And my special horror is having to come up with all the sounds I'm going to use at a gig before I get there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I am so much better on the fly than I am with programming because it's kind of like when you stick a chef in a kitchen and you just say, okay, there's your ingredients, go nuts, as opposed to saying, you have to stick to this menu because that's what you programmed. But like, oh, wait. What if I don't want to taste cumin right now and I want to do garam masala instead? You can make those adjustments on the fly. And that's one of my biggest, modeler arguments, really.
For me, that's always the biggest issue. I can create like basic that would be my pedal board presets, sort of.
Right.
But it's like, I'm that guy who's going to show up. I'm going to have an octave fuzz on my pedal board for every gig. I'm going to use it every third gig.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, and yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but because that's what I feel in the moment, and it's what works.
There was a moment I posted the other day from one of my local gigs, and I had found like right next to me is a studio board I use with a Line 6 HX1, and it has some really good Mutron auto wah filtery type stuff in it. And I posted a video months ago of me playing it, and I was like, I love that. Maybe I should program that in my studio, in my live board. And I never got around to it. And I had another guitar player on the gig, and I leaned down. I was like, let me see if I could find it. And I'm telling you, I found it. And what I found was cooler than what I wanted.
Yeah.
And it was this like really throaty kind of auto wah thing that was happening. And a guy came up to me and he was like, hey, what did you do there to get that auto wah sound? And I was like, I just did it on the fly. And I think if you know parameters in your head, you can make adjustments really quickly. And I love that because it's inspiration like in the moment.
Yeah.
Sonically.
Yeah. And see, I think that's why I hate things that people claim are usually, oh, it's the most versatile thing. I'm like, oh, great. So it's no one thing. Like, and sometimes I want that one thing. I want something to be what it is. I do like the HX1 though. That's a great Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, it is. But the thing is, you're only using it at one effect at a time. So you're kind of going back to where your thought process was, where it was like, okay, it's got all this stuff, but I can only use one thing at a time, which I'm totally fine with. Like I still have a Bosch trem because that's what it does really well. It does one thing really well. And we've gotten to the place in technology where one, chip can do so much inside of a box, but does it do all of it really well?
Yeah.
And that's my problem with the modeling world a little bit, is that I don't think it does all of it really well. I would like to focus like the Line 6, like the HX effects, just effects. Once you start putting amp modeling into things that also have effects, I'm like, some processing power is going to get stolen somewhere down the line and not recreate that amplifier algorithm as good as it should.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, no shade on that stuff, but it's just, That's why I like the UA stuff, is because at least they focus all of that DSP horsepower on recreating the amp, not
Yeah.
10 amps.
It's
But
one thing. It's
yeah,
one thing exactly.
but we're in a consumer society with that stuff, and it looks sexy to pay $1,000 for something and get the kitchen sink. I totally get it.
Yeah, same. I have a Helix floor. I use
Mhm.
it for some gigs because it makes sense and it's what the gig calls for. It's never the thing that inspires me to play. I'm never excited about going to play it. It's a tool because I have to use it for some things. And I've said it on this podcast. I've said it in other chats with other guitar players. I wish playing the Helix made me excited to play
Yeah.
guitar, because if it did, I'd save an awful lot of money that I have sunk into amplifiers.
And you nailed it right there with being excited. It's no secret that, I play, we both are big fans of like 2 Rock and Divided by 13
Mhm.
and other boutique companies and stuff like that. You know, I've had the pleasure of really getting close with the 2 Rock guys, and Eli's become one of my dear friends. And when he was in Nashville a few times, we talked about, like, we look in our rearview mirror and we still see our gear in the back.
Yeah.
And that is fun. Like, I get a lot of people that say, "Oh, when you're my age, you won't want to lift that stuff." I'm like, I hope I always want to lift that stuff, because that is what's fun to me. Turning around and seeing that stuff behind me
Yep.
is still fun. It's still, I make, I try not to take like 3 things in the trip at one time into the club. I still like to take it a couple pieces at a time, and I take my time with it, and I
Mm-hmm.
set it up the way I want it, get there early so I can tool around and make sure the room sounds the way I want it to sound. I just like it. It's just, to me, that's fun. It's like, I couldn't imagine, and this is, again, if you're a Tesla driver or you're an EV driver, whatever, like, that's cool. You obviously have reasons why you like it, and there's elements of that world that I like. But you don't go to a car show where everybody's got their hoods on their Teslas up. You know what I mean? You go to a car show because everybody's got stuff they want to, like, look at this. This is
Yeah.
a work of art. And that's
And
why I
it,
look at that gear as I look at it as it's
and
little
there's
works
an
of art.
experience of driving them that goes with that.
Yeah,
Just to talk about that. I'm not really a car person, which I'm really glad, because I can't afford to be both a car and a guitar person.
you and me both. Yeah.
But it's I play in this. I've been playing some pickup gigs with this cover band. They're like party cover band where they do the songs and it's just close enough for it to sound like the song they're covering, but it's everything's like 20 clicks faster, and there's a bunch of mashups and just to keep the party flowing. It's one of those kind of bands, right?
Oh, I've been there. Yeah.
But yeah, they can be fun. They can also be really challenging too.
It's a grind. Yeah.
Because you're playing and like suddenly calls out a tune. You're like, I've either never played this song, or I haven't played this song since I was 18 years old.
Like, I got to play "Hit Me With Your Best Shot" in like 8 bars. Here it comes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Or what we did, the one he called for me, and I know this is going to be weird for some of you guitar players, like called Yellow, like Coldplay.
Wow.
And I was like, I've literally never played this song. So I'm figuring it out as we go. So it's just, and we take requests and we'll just do them like as best we can. It's almost like a Broadway in Nashville band.
Yeah.
And I still take my pedal board of 2 Rock TS1 and a 410. Because that's the rig I'm excited to play. That works for me. I remember not the first time I gigged with him, but I think it was the first outdoor gig I did with him, where we provided our own PA. And he was like, "Oh, we got to mic you up." I'm like, "Man, this thing's real loud. I'm not really sure you do. This isn't that big." But he just handed me a mic cable. I was like, "Awesome. I guess I'll hand me a microphone at some point."
Well, I know where this is going.
Yeah, and he never did. So I was like, screw it. I don't need it. I actually think I had my 100-watt traditional clean on that gig, not the TS1. And so I was like, and we're playing, we're like halfway through, or like 3/4 of the way through, and he sees the mic cable on the ground. He's like, "Oh, did you never plug it in?" I said, "You never gave me a microphone. I didn't."
More importantly,
bring a mic.
He couldn't tell.
Yeah, exactly. He had no idea that I never plugged in.
I just fader on mute. It's not really doing much.
Yeah, you just tell me when you need me louder, and I can take care of it. Yeah, but on the stuff in the back of the car, dude, the very first time I ever bought, which I've bought one twice now and sold it both times. The very first time I ever bought an SVT, like a real SVT and an 810. I've only bought the 810 once because I'll only make that mistake one time.
That's for clubs. That's for backline.
Yeah, exactly. That's for the little 100-seaters,
Yeah.
For
Right.
bigger
Oh, yeah,
gigs, you need 2 of them.
that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, just driving and looking back and seeing a refrigerator-sized speaker cabinet in the back of your car, it's a blast.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, never gigged
Yeah.
it. Never,
Right.
ever.
Right. Sounds amazing, though.
Yeah, there's no
Incredible.
sound like it.
That's
And
true.
I find inspiration in the gear and the sounds I'm getting. And I think that's fine.
Yeah. No, I do too. And if your modeler inspires you, that's great.
I hope it does.
But I have a very famous acquaintance I've made recently who is a gear fanatic, has 2 rocks, and captures them in his quad cortex because he wants that sound, but he wants the convenience of flying with the quad cortex, being in a hotel room or whatever, and he's marrying those 2 worlds. It's pretty funny to go that roundabout way to come back, but I get it.
Yeah.
I get it because he's excited about the amps, but he's also looking for the portability factor in his particular world.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. You've done legit touring. Like, you've been on legit major tours, and like the most I've ever done is like weekend runs, right?
Mhm.
I've never even done like a full like week run, which is great.
Yeah.
That's fine. All of my playing's been cloistered around the southeastern United States. But even in doing that, the way I look at it and the way I've described it to people is that I don't, even when I was gigging 3-4 nights a week, I don't gig that much now. Like, if I get 3-4 a month, that's a good month for me at this
Same
point.
here.
Yeah. So I'm going to take the things I'm most excited to play.
Exactly.
And if a drummer can still drag all their shit,
Yeah.
I can drag an amp.
No, I'm right with you. It's got to be, all of that is actually making me rethink my gear situation entirely. Like, I'm doing a lot less sessions and I'm doing a lot less gigs where I'm required to wear a lot of hats.
Yeah.
I'm now doing my gig with my music to where I can wear the hat I want to wear. And it's usually one guitar and even making a pedal board that I want to make is a huge deal. I used to make pedal boards that would accommodate the gig.
Yeah.
The touring gig. So many times I'm building pedal boards to copy the sounds off of an artist's record, and although that's super fun, to not have to do that's kind of weird because you're like, what do I want to sound like? And man, that is a nice, when you turn that corner,
Yeah.
it's a direction I've never been in all my years, and it's fun. Like, when you see like a rig rundown from Premier Guitar, or you see somebody you admire, like if you check out like Ariel Posen's, rig rundown, like that's his board with his sounds that he made on his record. And he gets to create those live if he wants to, or whatever amalgamation he puts together for that. And I was like, wow, I have that freedom. I can do that. So my board is too big for me now, but I kind of copied like the Robin Ford approach when I saw him on that pedal show recently. And I was like, he's putting together the board he wants, regardless of the size.
Yeah.
And he's going to carry it. Like, I was talking to my buddy, Jeff Mackerlane, who knows Robin really well. And he was like, Robin always takes his shit. Like, like, unless he has to play a backline amp, he's always going to take the pedal board and the Dumble.
Yeah.
Always flying it, whatever.
Or now Little Walter, apparently.
He uses a Little Walters, but and I think that's just volume, issues now, from what I've heard him say. But I'm like, yeah, like the way my pedal board is now, like I can use the TS1 and the onboard effect, overdrive, which is amazing. Or I have a board that if I get stuck with a backline twin or something, I can make it sound like what I want to, because I have the board that allows me to do that.
That's such a big deal. And I am working on finally doing some original music. It's been sort of a thing that's been in the back of my brain for a long, long time. I've wanted to, but I was either, and don't get me wrong, I'm still too busy to do it, but I'm forcing myself to do it. But there's an awful lot of freedom in doing it. One, I'm tired. I don't want to do any more 4-hour gigs. I don't want to do any more 3-hour gigs. I'm sort of a 2 and done, 2 sets. I'm wiped. I'm old. I can't keep up with that kind of stuff.
So is your audience.
That's exactly.
And they don't want to stick around for that long either.
Nobody wants to be at a 9 to 1 show.
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants that.
No, exactly.
So, and it's funny because one of the first things I did was I thought, okay, what do I want to sound like? Like, And it honestly got to a point where I was like, I think I want a fuzz, a wah pedal, and an overdrive. And that's kind of it. Like, I'm not even a delay person.
Mm-hmm.
Like a little reverb either in the amp or in the loop if I'm using the TS1, which the TS, actually, I don't even use an overdrive if I'm using the TS1.
Dude, it's blowing my mind how much I'm like falling in love with that amp. It's all the things I ever wanted, and it's just great, man.
I think I heard you say on Dipped in Tone, which I really hope is out before this episode comes out. I'm pretty sure it will be.
Yeah,
it's out. I heard you say, I am a patron of the boys over there, so I got to see the episode a little early.
Lovely chats.
Yeah. So,
Chaps.
But I heard you say that you sort of struggled with the TS1 for a little bit, and then you listened to that Robin Ford episode on That Pedal Show. I had the exact same moment, same show.
No way.
Yeah, the exact same show. I had been talking to Eli. So I had talked to Eli at NAMM, not this year, but last year. And I told him that I was really, really leaning toward that direction, like wanting to get a TS1. And he said, okay, we can make it happen. Just let me know when you're ready. And that episode aired. I called him that day. I was like, all right, it's got to happen. I have to do it. 100% it's got to be done. And so the more I play that amp, the more I think it's the perfect amp. There's a learning curve on it.
It really is. And I'm glad you said that, because with most two rocks, there's a little bit of a learning curve, unless you're playing a traditional clean or, I mean, even a studio signature has an element of learning curve to it. There's guitar players that cannot wrap their brains around it, but that's okay. It just means if it's not for you, it's not for
100%.
you. That's totally fine. But the TS1, I talked to Eli about this, and he said, man, I think if it had a different name, it'd be more popular. And he's probably right. And sorry, Eli, if that's too inside baseballish, but I think he'd say that too, because, the Bloomfield Drive, Joey Landreth was playing that and really helped put that on the map. And that's been a real great Swiss Army amp for them. And it was what I ordered as my first two rock, because I was like, well, I own vintage Fenders. I have a vintage Marshall. I don't want a Vox. I want something that's big and beefy and reliable, takes pedals really great, and doesn't break up on two, like I need clean headroom. And I played that amp a lot. It's right behind me. That one. And it's killer. But what was funny was, once I watched that Robin episode about the with his Dumble, I was like, I'm pretty sure the TS1 I have on this shelf here, which is not here now, but it was at the time, I think that will do what I wanted to do. So I started to kind of really open it up and pull the foot switch out, because to me, it was like, oh, this is my 40-watt two rock. It wasn't my 100. I didn't know how great it really was. And then he built a TS1 for Butch Walker, and we had heard that. And we went to see Butch play in Atlanta with it, and he turned to me, we're in the audience, and he goes, I guess I can make a rock amp, because it was ridiculous sounding. And Butch was just using a fractal for effects, but he was using the amp for the drive. And I think he might have had a Bloomfield at one point too, earlier on, but he built him this TS1 for the Marvelous 3 stuff. And I was like, can my amp sound like that? And he was like, oh yeah, dude. So it was funny, because I had always kind of been playing it more like a clean amp.
Yeah.
And that was the problem. I wasn't really diving in. So I hope this isn't like too nerdy, but this is this is fun, revelatory stuff for guitar players. But so I started playing it, and I realized, like, man, there's so much more to this. And then there's apparently, if you get inside of it, there's like a little trim pot, I think, for a gain adjustment.
Yeah.
And we got in there and played around with that a little bit. And man, I didn't even need to, but I was like, this amp is out of hand good. What was funny was then we pulled the Bloomfield out, and we just pulled chassis just because the doctor was in. Like, why not get him look at all the patients, right?
Yeah.
And that guy was with me for 5 or 6 days in a row, and I never saw him happier than that moment, pulling out amps on my dining room table. And he was excited. He was like a little kid, and I was like, this is why you're a genius at this stuff, because you absolutely eat it and breathe it. And he said, now play the Bloomfield. And I played it, and he goes, I know why you like the TS1 more. And I was like, why? He goes, it's faster. He was like, it plays to you faster. He's like, the Bloomfield's a little softer power supply. The TS1's a faster, has more attack, more, when you play it, boom, it's firing back at you. And a lot of players don't like that.
Yeah.
I do.
I usually don't, actually.
That's why people like Fenders and old because they're slower and they sag more. And there's two rocks that do that, but the TS1 it's the most Dumble-esque amp they make in the image of it. And that's why I was like, man, well, I'll never really own a Dumble, but I can own this. It's far less expensive.
Yeah, that's exactly why I made the call to get mine. It's one of those amps. I normally like a slower response amp. Actually, it's why I normally don't like amps with EL84s. I feel like they're always a little faster.
Yeah.
In their response time, not just frequency. Because okay, this is going to be maybe controversial among cell guitar players. I can work with most guitar tone. I can play, like, I don't need my tone to be perfect. I can give me an amp, I'll plug in, I'll make it work.
I've played plenty of Fender Tone Masters with overdrive pedals in front of them, and I've gotten through it just fine.
And you mean the modeling ones, not the old 1990s custom shop Tone Masters?
No.
Yeah.
No.
I still want one of those. There's one for sale, and I know the guy who's selling it, but I can't buy more amps. I just can't do it. Not right now, anyway. But I got the TS1. It took so much time to dial in. I think players are scared to turn knobs. I've mentioned this on the podcast before.
Absolutely.
Players are so scared they want to play in this like 30% from like 4 to 7 in any knob, not just the tone knob. They're scared to take it into a different place. And if you are an amp like the TS1, or I could name a bunch of Mesa Boogies that aren't for you.
Right.
I don't want listeners you to think that we're only talking about $5,000 two-rock amps.
No.
I'm talking about a lot of different amps that you need to know that sometimes it's okay to take that knob and take it to 1 and decide that that's where it sounds good for you, for what you're doing.
Most people that play a two-rock, if they have their bass above 9 o'clock, I'd be shocked.
Yeah.
And the reason there's so much bass on board is because Eli wants to accommodate for single coil pickups of all varieties. He wants you to play a Strat with a lens and go boom and hit, and that thing sounds like Riviera Paradise, like
absolutely,
like Lenny or something. You know what I mean? Big and fat and clean. And you're right. Like, man, I got turned off to boogies at such a young age, and I never got warmed up to them again until they started making some models that sounded like Fenders.
Yeah,
and then
dude.
I was like, oh, okay, like the
Fillmore and the California Tweed,
and not only that, like what was the Blue Angel,
still that may be my favorite
Great.
Mesa Boogie.
It's every blues player's, and because they kind of was more Fender-esque.
Yeah,
but I remember taking playing like like Mark II whatever's and scooping that EQ to try to make it sound more like a Fender because that's what I knew. Which is what's funny is it's inherently kind of, I'm not going to say wrong about a Fender, but it's why Dumble existed anyway, because Dumble was fixing all of the issues that Fender had, and players wanted tighter low end, less breakup. They wanted the pretty, overall tone that a Fender had, not taking anything away from it, but they wanted some, they wanted to take it to the beauty salon a little bit, get a little, get that low end tighter, that, when I push the amp in overdrive, have it not totally fall apart, make it hold together more, and then like the Paul Rivera type stuff too. Like it's all making Leo's thing better.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's what a lot of guitar players are after. And I think that's perfectly fine. But if you get turned off to a Mesa Boogie, I understand. Like I had one of my friend who got me into this entire world of having one foot in the musical instrument world. Sadly, he passed away a couple years ago. His name's Scott Lombardo, and he was my Fender rep when I was like 21 at a music store I was working at. And he was the boogie rep for the entire East Coast. Basically, he sold more boogies out of the Sam Ash in Edison, New Jersey in the 80s or 90s than like the entire chain of Sam Ash.
Wow.
And so Boogie was like, do you want a job? And boy, he could walk up to a Tremaverb, which I thought was horrible, and make it sound ungodly. Like, and he was a real big like Ty Tabor fan. Like, and I was like, how are you getting that amp to sound that good? I could not do it. And he, man, could make that amp just any of those boogies. He could just kill it, man.
They had such an interactive EQ that turning one knob wasn't. If you were used to Fender amps, turning one knob did not do what you thought it was doing.
I got an old 65 basement here. Like
Huh?
if you could turn it from 3 to 4 and you might not hear that much variation.
Exactly. Or like if you played vintage Marshalls, you could turn it from 1 to 10 and maybe not hear a
Yeah,
variation.
exactly. No, I have. Yeah, I mean, like for the YouTube crowd, I mean, there's an old Marshall right there, and
Yeah.
there's the basement's right there, you know. But you know, there's a newer Silver Jubilee right here, and that's really fun. I enjoy playing that, but that's, you know, kind of the world I live in, either Fendery Dumble stuff or Marshall, you know.
Yeah, I get it. Well, you know, moving on from maybe being a commercial for Two Rock, you're welcome, Eli. Let's talk about you're putting out your own music now, which you've spent 25 or more years as, you know, a side guy playing other music. When, you know, I know because I've seen the clips. I still haven't caught you live, but I'm going to catch you at the Underdog one of these days.
We've been like ships passing in the night many times. You were going to come to the Two Rock party we had where we played. I almost saw you at Mythos.
Yeah, I did catch you obviously at NAMM playing with Matt, but not your band.
Right.
So, which is always a different experience when it's your band. But now you're writing your own music. You've put out a single with a music video. Like you're a proper rock star now, blues star. It's a great tune. So tell us about that experience.
Yeah. So it's this song that I put out called "She's Like the Weather," and I've been playing that song. I used to do clinics for Martin, and I did it from about 6 years, from like 2012 to maybe 2018, and that was one of the songs I would open the clinics with or close the clinics with, and people really liked it. And I could always tell because the guys liked it, but I could also tell that their wives and girlfriends liked it. So I was like, oh, because it's a really tongue-in-cheek song about relationships. Basically, you know, it's about you don't give up on you don't not go outside because it's raining or snowing. You get a shovel or an umbrella, and you don't give up on your relationship just because there's a hard time. You try to fix it and get through it. But hey, nowadays people just swipe and they just move to the next person, I guess, you know. But in any case, I heard a men's coach that I was working with, basically like a life coach, you know, who was trying to teach me about relationships and being more transparent and having, you know, really tapping into, you know, my integral self, essentially. And he said, yeah, he's like, your woman's like the weather. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty cool line, you know? And this was 7 or 8 years ago or more. I just always stuck with me, and I wrote the song around it. And I was like, you know, I got to start recording some of this music. Because the thing that holds a guy like me back, who's a sideman turned educator turned, you know, content guy, whatever, is money. Like it costs money to get in the studio and work with some people. And then when you start tracking this song, if it's not going in the direction you want to go in, you're screwed. Like you got to scrap it and start over. And there's nothing worse than starting to record a song that you already tried to record once. Like it's really like trying to get blood from a stone, as they would say, because it's like you're squeezing all this creativity out of something that you already tried to do. So I enlisted one of my sideman gigs for a long time on and off has been with this artist named Lucy Silvis. Lucy Silvis is an amazing singer-songwriter in Nashville, and I have played some of the most fun gigs, and her music is so incredible, and it's very challenging on a lot of levels. But she's directly tied to the brothers Osborne camp because she's married to John Osborne.
Gotcha.
So we would play gigs, and sometimes some of the brothers' band would play with us. And I got to be friends with their drummer. His name's Adam Box, Mississippi boy.
Yeah.
He's from Meridian.
Yeah, I know. I know Adam's dad.
No kid. Well, he lives here now.
Yeah.
Yeah. They moved up here.
Yeah, he did. Because he retired. He used to work at a music store down in Meridian. That's how I met him.
There you go. And he's awesome. They're a wonderful family.
Yeah.
And Adam was he's just a very creative dude. And he's not Nashville like in that he comes from things from a different direction, works in his own way. And he's just a groove monster. And I was like, man, you guys, you know, the cool thing about the first couple Brothers records is they used their band, which is not typical in Nashville. So they used their band to cut the records, and they worked with the legendary producer Jay Joyce. And I was like, man, Jay Joyce's productions are out of this world.
Yeah.
And I was like, can you bring some of your experience with Jay Joyce into this song and help me make it better? And he was like, okay, man, I'll try it. Like, he's so humble. He's a sweet Mississippi boy. And he was like, all right. And then he sends me the drum track back because I played like a scratch vocal and guitar. I was like, put some drums to it. And he sends me the drums. I was like, holy shit, this is cool. Then we start doing the bass and keys. And we basically brought in the brothers, old rhythm section. Two of the guys have moved on from the band. And I always loved playing with these guys. And they made some really, really great stuff on the record. And we just started moving it from there. And then he called me out of the blue. I remember I was in my driveway. And he's like, hey, man, I think you should make a video for this. And I was like, really? He's like, and you should be like a weatherman. And I was like, he's like, I think it'll be really funny. I was like, how the hell with it? I want to try it, So I said, we're in the video age. And if I put this out as like my first representation of me creating music, there's got to be a visual component.
Yeah.
And I reached out to the folks that own the Underdog here in Nashville. And they're like, yeah, man, come in, during the day. Take it till about 4 p.m. and then we got to open the place. And I had a pretty small video crew in there, but a pro video crew, a director I found named Brian Totoro. I worked with him on some Universal Audio stuff in the past. And he's done music videos for like Daryl Hall and Joss Stone and a bunch of other people. So he knew what he was doing. And we had a blast. And then we did a green screen thing where I'm a weatherman with some goofy attire on. And we did the green screen thing in his house, and he hired a video effects person to do it. And they just did an amazing job. And I was like, literally, I have one edit and that's it. And
really?
It was like, I'm telling you, I said, because it came band shot first, then it cut to the weatherman stuff too soon. I was like, give that another 4 beats and that was it, man. And he just did a great job. And the feedback on the song and the video has been really, really great. And it's just been fun. Like, you just got to do it. Put the art out. Try it.
Yeah, I love it. And also, there's a part of what you do that's so tied to YouTube and to video and edit and educating. Almost said editing. That too.
Well, there's that too.
But educating, and it makes total sense. Go ahead and do the video aspect of it, get it done. And it's such a great fun video. I really appreciate that the age of music videos has gotten so good in the age when there's no TV channels to watch music videos on anymore.
Right. Isn't that funny?
It's so good because there are so many folks putting out creative and fun music videos just because they want to and they can.
Yeah.
And, hey, they've got some friends who have some equipment and they're like, hey, let's make this work. And I think some of the best music videos are coming out now when we don't have MTV VH1 to air them.
Sometimes we rehearse in this spot in Nashville, and they'll play like CMT or whatever. And we have to turn it off because it gets distracting after a while. But like when you're trying to focus on your tune and there's like, Kelsey Ballerini or something, it has her new video up. But it's a lot of, they're cool because they post a lot of like baby acts too. Like, if you got a video, they're playing it seems like. And it's like, man, like, there's a lot of really interesting music videos that still exist out there, and it's not necessarily a channel devoted to it like when we were growing up.
I love that. And so I love that you're doing original music. You also, we talked about something you're doing, you're working on. We're both big blues fans. So like, I think there's still a lot of juice left in that orange. I know some people think blues is like bygone and past us, but right. I'm like, there's an awful lot of great music being made and doing well that tells us that is not the case. There's still so much happening.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that's great about people are guitar fans, and the blues is such a great vehicle for you to write, play, sing, but then express who you are as a soloist too. And it's funny because I haven't played like my music in my gig is like part blues, part R&B, part singer-songwriter, but it's all driven by the blues influence. But when I was playing with Matt Schofield at NAMM, I was like, Matt's a proper blues musician, like in the sense of like he's building the long solo. I did 2 choruses and I was out. I was like, I did like jam night etiquette, right?
Yeah.
But Matt was like, all right, this is my thing. I'm going to show you what I do, and not from an arrogant way. It's just the tradition of playing it, and I was like, oh man, I forgot that's how blues gigs used to be. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to sing 2 verses and then I'm going to solo for a while.
Yeah. And the first 2 choruses is going to be like
simple
note per measure almost.
Exactly. So you have somewhere to go. You know? Whereas I struggle with that. A lot of my songs don't warrant like super long solo breaks.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with that. But it's just funny because sometimes if I have to host a blues jam or something, I'm like, okay, this is why we start slow, because we have runway.
Yes.
But I think that's what's back to your thing. Like, I think that's what's attractive about the style of music is that you can go hear Joe Bonamassa and hear him do a multitude of different things. And then you'll hear Reese Winans and you'll hear Josh Smith and you'll hear all these great musicians in his band do what they do and express themselves on their instrument, but still have the entertainment value, to go along with it. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm still finding the difficult thing about this day and age is I think when somebody sees and hears you, they think that you're a fully baked product. And that's not how music and artistry works. Like, yeah, I put this song out in the video, but I don't have 12 other of those in the can ready to go because I don't have the money to do it. I have other things in the can that's coming out, but I'm not going to put another 6 videos out that are, umpteen $1,000s to pay for.
Right.
Because I can't swing it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. And being an artist today is almost harder. So on last week's episode, as listeners are listening to this, I had Jax Hollow, who's another Nashville-based singer-songwriter, guitarist, monster guitar player, and she talked about those struggles of being an independent artist trying to make it in this industry, and the money and and nobody talks about that part of it. Everybody sees the fun music video that you put up on YouTube, and they're like, oh, well, that's who they are. That's what they do. This is the whole thing. And you're like, right. It's way more nuanced and complicated than that.
Yeah. I mean, I love the comments when people say, it's so great, give us more. And I'm like, I wish I could afford it. It's too expensive, and I have a running tally that will make it into a YouTube video next year, probably, of how much I spent per session, because what I'm doing now is once every 6 weeks, I'm booking studio time and we're going in and we're just cutting like 2 songs. And I love that because it's not the Nashville way. The Nashville way is singer-songwriter comes in, you're going to play 5, 6, maybe more songs in a session, and you're going to go through them in a couple takes and you're going to move on. And I just don't want to make music that way. I want to like hunker down and like, if that snare doesn't work, I want to try 5 snares to see what the best one is. I don't really do that too much with guitar playing, because I usually know what sound I'm going for. And if I can't find it in about 2 minutes, then something's wrong.
Yeah.
But my point is I'm booking these sessions and, the studio's $600 for the day. Each player, I'm going to give a few $100 a song to, the engineer, the assistant engineer, lunch. So, at the end of the day, you're in it for $3,500 probably. I don't know, like, I'm just trying to do some quick math.
Yeah, some napkin math there.
It's probably like $2,500, just for the day. Now, we haven't done a vocal session yet. We haven't mixed it yet. We haven't mastered it. We haven't paid anybody to do artwork. Now, I could do artwork on my own or something, but I like to find people that are specialists,
Same.
And it's going to, each song is probably $3,000 to $4,000 a tune.
Yeah. And that's, are you taking any of it and doing any guitar extra at home, or you only, it's sometimes, like you leave it at the studio?
Sometimes. There's some of it I have to do on these new songs that I'm recording where we just kind of run out of time or we get tired and I'm like, look, I'm too tired to play this solo. I want to do it with fresh ears or whatever. That's another thing too. If you're working in the studio for 8-9 hours, your ears get pretty beat up and you can't really tell which good anymore sometimes.
So when I was in audio engineering school at MTSU, I developed an opinion. I don't think anyone taught me this. Look, I did a lot of partying in Murfreesboro too, so I can't be assured that no one actually just told me this and I held on to it. But I have this like serious opinion that the musician should not also be the engineer, should not also be the mixer, should not also be the mastering engineer, because our ears get tired.
Yeah.
And also our brains will play tricks on us.
Yeah.
And the way I explain it to people is if you go see your favorite band, right? Go see whoever it is, your favorite band, you know every song. You're singing along to every word. You hear everything perfectly. What happens the first time that band says, oh, we're going to play a new one for you that hasn't been released yet? Can you understand a single lyric?
Nope.
No. And the PA didn't suddenly get worse.
Right.
What happened is you don't know this song, so your brain can't fill in all the gaps that it was filling in for you anymore. Your brain has been lying to you about how that band sounds the entire gig. because you know that band.
Yeah.
So what happens when you write a song and then you engineer it and then you mix it and then you master it? It's the same reason you shouldn't proofread your own writing. Your brain is fixing the errors.
That's true.
You're going to miss things.
That's a really, really good point, especially someone in your line of work outside of, what you do in the music space. You're reading all the time.
All the time.
And your brain becomes a supercomputer for that kind of stuff, especially when it comes to your own errors and your own language in text, But no, man, you're totally on it, because demo-itis is a real thing too. When you hear something that you think you love in the demo you did, or the scratch guitar take or whatever, you'll think like, I can never beat that. It has to be that. But meanwhile, the quality isn't as good as it could be. There's a little performance flub you wish you could change. Then sometimes you let that go in the nature of the integrity of the recording and the energy was good or whatever. But there's some time, like I've been on sessions where I've had to fix guitar parts, and the producer would be like, okay, well, here's some sacred cows that we have to save. And it's licks or a signature thing where they were like, that needs to be in the track. And then the producer's like, well, it needs to be better. And Corey's going to make it better, or whoever. It doesn't necessarily mean to be me, but I've had to play that role a few times. But yeah, your brain plays tricks on you to the point where, here's a perfect, an hour ago example. I've been tossing this mix back and forth with my engineer friend. And it was more about, the mix was great. There was some vocal tuning things I didn't like. And yes, everyone tunes their vocals nowadays. Nobody sings it perfectly all the time.
No.
And for me, the vocal tuning came in with, was it a B or a B flat? Like one of those, like, let's try it, but because I was somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And if you sing it in the middle, and then your harmony's in the middle, and then another harmony's in the middle, you get all this like weird, harmony stuff that's not right. So you got to make
dissonance at that point.
Dissonance. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. And so I've been going back and forth with my engineer saying, okay, everything's great. Can you fix this one note in this line? I can hear it is rubbing somebody. And he's like, oh yeah, no problem. We can dive into that. And then I said, when I had him on the phone, I said, now this is a song, I'll back it up in a minute, that I've recorded a long time ago, and I'll tell you about the project. I said, is this cool? I was like, do you like this? Because I was like, I can't tell. And he was like, dude, it's fun. It's grooving. I like it. And I was like, okay, great. Like, and I know he's not just telling me that.
Yeah.
Like he's getting paid regardless. But the thing is, I was like, I can't tell anymore. I'm so far in this track that I don't even know what's good about it.
Yeah.
And in that song is one of a group of 6 songs I picked pandemic time, when I was like, I'm going to go in the studio and record a bunch of obscure blues tunes my way, because I thought, I love the blues. I want to position myself in that genre, but I'm not believable as a blues artist if I write about how my baby left me.
Right.
Because I'm like a dude that's doing pretty good. Like I'm okay. Like I got very few problems in life. I don't have a lot to sing about like the pioneers did.
Yeah.
That is their heartbreak coming through those songs. That is their pain coming through those songs, or their joy or their sentiment or whatever. What if I just told it from my point of view? Haven't they done that in movies a million times? And blues in general is like that. Like, how many songs did Willie Dixon write that other people have recorded?
Right.
Like virtually the entire blues catalog as we know it, like a third of it is written by Willie Dixon, it seems like.
He was also the first person who knew how to fight for copyright. That's one of the reasons we know that. He was the one that sued Zeppelin over Whole Lotta Love.
Whole Lotta Love. Yeah, that's right. So my thought was, let me just do them the way I do them. And some of them are done in a traditional manner, and some of them are done a little wackier, a little modern. One of them is like this Howlin' Wolf song called Who's Been Talking? That sounds like the Willie Nelson record, Teatro, that Daniel Lanois produced. I love that record. It's got 2 drummers on it, percussion, and we did some fun stuff with it. That does not sound anything like a Howlin' Wolf song. But my thought is, it shouldn't. That's already been done. I'm never going to be any better than the people that did it before me. I can do it my way and see what shakes out. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. And so before we started recording, we started talking about some of those old blues cats that sort of inspire us. And it's not always the typical, don't get me wrong, I freaking love some B.B. King and Albert King and all the Kings and Albert Collins and Of course, I love Stevie Ray Vaughan. I don't mention him as much because I like to go back to some of the older source material. But there's some great artists out there nobody's talking about.
Well, also too, like before you get into that,
Yeah,
Stevie Ray Vaughan was a modern blues guitar player.
Yeah, very modern.
He was, for the time, that's why we liked him.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, honestly, like after Eddie Van Halen, like it was Stevie Ray Vaughan. Now, obviously, much different skill set.
Yeah.
But Stevie Ray was a modern player because he was taking those ideas from all those heroes. And I mean, all those early records, like there's so many covers on those records.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
There's an awful lot. And to this day, I got to be really honest, like my idea of Hendrix comes from my experience through Stevie Ray Vaughan to get to Hendrix.
I found a Hendrix record in my dad's collection, literally record collection. It was the smash hits, like it's like a greatest hits of Hendrix, like before it was a greatest hits thing. It was called Smash Hits, and it had all the typical songs on there. And I was like, oh, because I wanted to hear Voodoo Child for real.
Yes.
Like I didn't want to hear, because I love Stevie Ray Vaughan's version, but I was like, oh, it's got to go back further. Then I started to realize, like, oh, this is how everybody does it. They go backwards eventually.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, for me, there were years before I knew that Little Wing had lyrics. And
well, that's funny.
Yeah. I didn't know because I knew Stevie's rendition of Little Wing without lyrics.
Yeah.
And so, but then like you go back even further. Okay, I've been on this kick lately. I mentioned it like on Threads or somewhere. And talking about some artists like that we overlook. You mentioned to me earlier talking about folks like Johnny Copeland, Johnny Guitar Watson. I'm really, really into. Lately, I've been on this kick. Actually, I listened to him all the way to Nam and back. Is Gatemouth Brown?
Oh my gosh,
dude!
I saw Gatemouth Brown open for Clapton during the From the Cradle era.
What?
Yes, dude. It was, and he was equally as good as Clapton. Equally.
Oh my gosh.
It was so, and what was awesome about that was I saw him. I used to I was born and raised in like what they call the Lehigh Valley, which is like,
oh, I know where that is.
Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton, but I lived on the Jersey side.
I applied to Lehigh University and got accepted, just couldn't afford to go there.
Nah, yeah, for sure. It's up there. Lafayette, Lehigh. That's like the things up there, universities. And I had this group of friends, and the one friend's mother said, Clapton's coming to the Spectrum in Philly. I'll take us and get us a limo if you'd let me come with you guys. We were like, okay, your mom can come with us to see Clapton.
Right.
And it was awesome. And it was Gad on drums, like the whole thing,
Man.
And I was a Gatemouth Brown fan, and I couldn't believe he was opening. I didn't know he was opening.
Yeah.
And then it was shortly after that, after I moved to Pittsburgh, which is 5 hours east or west, a few years after moving there, I got into a swing band, and I was really into that Gate Swings record that Gatemouth did with Take the A Train on it and stuff. And I learned those songs, and then I learned them for the swing band. So I was always in and around Gatemouth Brown somewhere. And, and you got a Firebird back there. I got a Firebird.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought this guy is the coolest, like, because he's playing swing, like he wasn't playing like typical stuff,
And even then, like the record that I really got into on the flight. So when I got into Gatemouth, sorry, y'all, my hair has gotten really long. I know you can't see this in the YouTube, in the podcast, but in the YouTube video, you see me continually messing with these headphones. It's driving me crazy. I had only really gotten familiar with this like 70s forward stuff, the like Resurgence era Gatemouth Brown. I didn't know about his Peacock Records days from 45 to like 59 or something like that.
Wow, okay.
And so I start listening to, there's a record that I guess it came out in the early 2010s. I had never heard, and I'm listening to this old blues stuff, and I get to like Midnight Hour, and I'm like, that's rock and roll.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, go further back. I like Mary Is Fine. I'm like, that's rock and roll.
Rock and roll.
3 years before Rocket 88.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, he was such a pioneer. He was such a monster player, and not enough people talk about him or know about him. And I think there's still to this day underrated, unheard blues music out there. Not just being made today, but from the past.
From the past. And that was, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you're go ahead.
Cut you off. No, and that was sort of the impetus behind this project was, I'm going to do, I just started listening to playlists with like obscure stuff. And if I knew the song, I just fast forwarded through it. Like if it was, whatever, it was messing with the kid, I changed it because I knew that song already. But like, I did, there's a great, speaking of Junior Wells, a tune that I'm doing called Two-Headed Woman. And that doesn't want me to sound like, I'll be so crass. It's not like what the International Blues Society wants me to sound like. They want me to sound like what they're used to hearing, which is fine. But I'm like, I don't think I can be that guy and be true to myself, because I have influences of rock and metal and country and folk, that's all going to come out. Like all these songs I'm writing now aren't traditional blues songs, but they still come from that place. But anyway, these songs that I chose to record, Two-Headed Woman by Junior Wells, Who's Been Talking by Howlin' Wolf, Heebie Jeebies by Johnny Copeland, Hot Little Mama by Johnny Guitar Watson. What else did we do? I Wouldn't Treat a Dog the Way You Treated Me by Bobby Blue Bland.
Oh, man,
amazing
I love Bobby.
Song. Another guy, like, he's in the pantheon, but not talked about enough as he should. I mean, one of the best blues crooners ever.
Yeah, like he should be. He's okay. It's not. Maybe it's because he's not a guitarist. I mean, he plays, but he's not like.
Yeah, he's not like.
But nobody talks about him like the way they do B.B. King, and they should.
Right, absolutely.
I mean, they have a record together that sounds incredible. If nobody's listened to it, you really need to listen to it.
I got to go back and.
Yeah, I've got to go back and revisit it. It's been a few years. And the club I used to run sound at, Bobby would come play every now and again.
Nice.
And what a time.
Yeah.
What a time that would it was only a couple of times when I was working there, because he was already kind of big deal. We're talking, I don't know how many Grammy Awards he's won at this point. So listeners, if you're not hip to any of these cats we've been saying, you really got to go listen to them. I recognize not everyone that listens to this is like a hardcore blues aficionado like I am. That's too fancy a word for blues, but it's just who I am.
No, dude, you and I, we always geek out about this stuff, and you always seem to get it with me. Like, you always end up saying something that makes me go like, man, Philip gets me, and you did it several times at NAMM, even whether you knew or not. I can't even remember what it was now, but like before we jumped onto this podcast, like we were geeking out about this very thing.
Yeah.
It's like, man, let's save this and let's talk about it, because it's fun. And also I want to create this sort of like holistic approach to recording music where it's like, record what you want and have fun and put it out, as long as you're giving due to who created it, the songwriter or whatever, then go for it. Because it's been, we can look at you can look at Wes Montgomery records, George Benson records. They did all the Beatles covers, all that kind of stuff they would do with string sections. Like, so I don't feel bad about making an EP that's going to have some of my favorite old obscure blues tunes and then put a record out of my own stuff that will sound completely different.
No, and it's the thing I like to remind people. So before I got into public librarianship, which is what I do for a living now, but before that, I thought I was going to go to college and study ethnomusicology and teach music and the sociology of music around blues and jazz and its impact on cultures and those kinds of things. Like, so I've done so much reading and so much study, and every time I think I've gotten somewhere, I realize there's still this other like whole avenue I've never gone down. But I remind people when they we have, I like to refer to them as blues lawyers, and I don't mean them in the way like guitar players mean. I used this term long before I ever knew that guitar players would sometimes refer to people who had money and bought fancy guitars but didn't really play and call them blues lawyers. I didn't really know that term. I used it to mean the folks who try to dictate what is and isn't blues.
Oh boy.
And I do a little of that too, but it's from a spirit, I think, when I say it, because I'm not trying to I'm not trying to disparage the music anyone makes. Like, for example, I like Joe Bonamassa. I'm not as big a fan of his music. It's not my thing. There's just something to it that I think for me, it leans a little harder rock and roll, which is great.
And he would say that.
Yeah, it's totally okay.
He says he's not a blues guitar player. He's a blues inspired.
But oh my gosh, has he done great things for the blues and music. But, people like, oh, well, Robert Johnson played 3-chord blues. I'm like, have you ever listened to Hot Tamales? Or Red Hot?
Hot Tamales in the Red Hot.
I was like, have you
That's
ever...
a jump swing tune, man. That's like a 1-6-2-5.
Yeah. I'm like, it's got a 1-1-7-4 minor 4. I'm like, there's more chords in that song than basically anything the Black Crowes ever wrote, you know? Or I like to talk about live. He was known for playing show tunes. He'd play polka music.
Well, he'd was play the pop music of the day.
Yeah. He'd play whatever was pop music of the day live. Because that's what people wanted to listen to.
Yeah. I mean, and... like those guys were smart. They wanted to get paid.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
They weren't walking in the juke joint being just a drink. They wanted to do that, and they wanted to chase women probably too. But like, they wanted to walk out with some money in their pocket.
That's
100%. And
100%.
playing Night and Day, or a Cole Porter song, would probably that some fella and his lady can dance to is dude, if you made $1 on that shit back then, like that's good money.
That's real good money
for a tip. No, but yeah, I would call them more like the blues police.
Yeah.
And I think they're in every like really hardcore genre. Like I'm sure they have it I know they have it in the bluegrass world. I mean, I've heard horror stories about like, don't show up with a snare drum at a blues. I knew a guy, my gosh, his hero was Bill Monroe, and he got to open for him like in the Ace. And his band did like, they were progressive. They were doing like Beatles covers, bluegrass style, and like, all that kind of stuff, but like way before anybody was doing it. And he was like, oh, Mr. Monroe, it's such an honor to meet you. And we were just such fans. And he literally said to them, and he does this great impression. He's like, you boys done bastardized my music. And this guy later became friends with Bill Monroe.
Yeah.
But that story kills me every time, because if nothing takes the wind out of your sails of having your hero tell you bastardized his music, but I get it. And, I ran into that. I knew I wasn't going to win like the local IBC thing, because I played a rock tune at the end, but I played one cover. All the other songs I wrote, and I was proud of that. And it was funny. One of the local, vice president or whatever, I can't remember what his title is. He came out to one of my shows and he goes, are you going to enter again? I was like, I don't know. This was this past year. And he said, I think you should. And I was like, okay. And he goes, let me give you some advice. Maybe dumb it down a little bit. And I was like, I don't know, man. We played our set. He came up to me afterward. He was like, fuck that. Just do what you do. He was like, forget what I said. He goes, just forget what I said. And I was like, I was planning on it. I was like, but I know, like, and the guy that won, amazing guitar player, great singer, but he brought horns, played a slow blues, carved the box out perfectly. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I was like, first of all, I'm not going to bring a horn section or play songs that I don't feel comfortable about playing all the time just to win a competition and go to Memphis. Like I'm not going to do that. And I had somebody even on Facebook saying like that I was two-hand tapping during my solos and I was too raw. And I was like, dude, I never did that. I don't know what you were watching, but and I played I played the Johnny Guitar Watson song first, and I played 3 of my other songs after that were completely original that I'm sure other people did not do as much of. So no tapping on the blues for me.
I've entered a couple of IBC competitions as well. Never won one. Come in second, but never won it. So it's just, that's a whole other scene. That's anyway, a whole other podcast.
Right. But that goes into the sort of like gatekeepery mentality. I don't like treating music as a relic on a shelf that you pull down and say, this is what blues is, kids.
Yes.
It's just music,
And I think it's totally okay to say, that isn't the traditional definition of blues, but it can also be this, and this is this. And honestly, I think we're far enough along the lines that, this is why the Grammys have 2 different blues record of the year awards, one for traditional, so that you appease those, and I know that like that's the category I absolutely adore, despite being a little more electrified than those albums typically are. Modern, or I think contemporary blues. That's it. Yeah. So, well, Corey, we are actually over time, and we need to transition over to Patreon for a little bit, chat a little further. But in the meantime, where can the folks find you, even though all the links are below, y'all?
Yeah. Well, I said this the other night at the gig. I'm the only Corey Congilio that exists. So even if you spell my name wrong, you'll find me. You know, you figured out how to spell Bonamassa. You can figure out Congilio.
I don't know. I still have to second guess it every time.
Well, Google does it for us.
Yeah.
You know? But so my point is, as much as I would have wanted to change my name early on, there's a part of me that's glad I didn't, because I'm the only one. So find me there.com. And if you want to learn about my online teaching, there's a link to my site, Working Class Guitar, on that site as well. And my song She's Like the Weather and video is out. It's on my YouTube channel. And later this year, I'll be putting out probably a 6-song blues EP with some of my favorite tunes. Hey, Slash did a blues EP. I can do a blues EP.
He did. You're right. He did.
So yeah, so it's going to be a fun year of releasing music, and we'll continue through 26. Not trying to rush it, but man, that's what we'll be doing.
Yeah, that's crazy. Plans already into that year.
I know.
Well, listeners, we're going to head over to Patreon. If you want to join us on Patreon, it is patreon.com/40watt podcast, where $5 a month gets you extra episodes every week that I put out an episode. Because, sometimes we miss weeks. That's okay. But until then, if you do that, that's great. I appreciate it. It helps keep the show going. But if that's not you, I'll catch you on the next episode. Until then, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.